The Lion Garden has become a cage of golden talismans, and the fox demon's hidden true form has finally been dragged into the open. With Chen and Daoist nun Liu Boqi joining forces, the treasure creation slug demon has nowhere left to hide, but the moment its capture is secured, another battle over the spoils seems ready to begin. The old winehouse keeper had barely poured the first cup when a familiar troublemaker kicked open the door and declared that the jianghu had brought another disaster. "Come in, fellow travellers, warm yourselves by the fire and enjoy the spectacle. Tonight's story has demons, treasures, saber immortals, and enough scheming to make even the tea leaves nervous." Long before Chen and his companions arrived at the Lion Garden, 4 wandering cultivators had already become honoured guests of the Liu clan. They were young Master Du, his personal maidservant Meng Long, and a master-disciple pair accompanied by a small fox and an emerald snake. Their alliance had begun by chance. The 2 groups had crossed paths in the wilderness and joined forces to suppress a mountain infested with demons. Young Master Dugu had contributed the most to the victory, yet when the spoils were divided, he selected only a few ordinary objects, and casually left several valuable spirit tools and a vast pile of immortal coins to the master and disciple. That generosity was precisely what made the elderly cultivator suspicious. In the cultivation world, treasures could turn brothers into enemies. So a stranger who willingly surrendered wealth was often more difficult to understand than one who openly fought for it. After discussing the matter privately, however, the master and disciple reached a rather shameless conclusion. Their lives simply were not valuable enough for someone like young Master Dugu to spend so much effort baiting them into a trap. Thus, they boldly asked to continue travelling with him and Meng Long. Their gamble paid off. After destroying 2 more groups of demons, the pair once again obtained several hundred immortal coins. Throughout the journey, the elderly cultivator carefully watched young Master Dugu, and gradually became convinced that this mysterious young man from the luminous Vermilion Empire truly had little interest in fighting others over mere money or treasures. Young Master Dugu himself never entered battle. Whenever anyone asked, he merely claimed to be a crude martial artist who had learned a few basic skills. Naturally, neither the master nor his disciple believed such an explanation. The true shock came from Meng Long. She had fought several times, and every time her sword left its sheath, the master and disciple were forced to reassess the depth of this strange pair. Meng Long was a sword cultivator. More astonishing still, she possessed a legendary immortal technique capable of summoning a night-wandering deity nearly 9 meters tall. And she was no ancient expert, maintaining a youthful appearance. She was genuinely a young woman who had yet to reach 20. Her cultivation had not yet entered the 5th tier, but the killing power she displayed when attacking was already enough to contend with cultivators of the abode tier. For a sword cultivator, realm alone never told the entire story. Sword cultivators were famous for turning every ounce of cultivation into terrifying offensive power, and Meng Long was clearly one of those rare talents capable of fighting above her nominal tier. Such a prodigy had an enormous chance of eventually becoming an earth-immortal sword cultivator. Yet in young Master Dugu's eyes, allowing her to remain at his side as a maidservant seemed completely natural. Anyone with even a little experience in the martial world could understand what this implied. If the maidservant was already a heaven-defying sword seed, then the clan standing behind her young master had to be deeper than appearances suggested. The elderly cultivator searched his memories again and again, yet he could not recall any famous powerhouse surnamed Dugu in the luminous Vermilion Empire. He even considered the great forces farther north and south. One was a pillar clan of the nation, while another possessed golden core tier cultivators, but neither seemed capable of matching the talent and wealth young Master Dugu had casually displayed. In the end, he could only attribute the mystery to the vastness of the luminous Vermilion Empire. It was a land overflowing with sword cultivators and ancient experts, many of whom preferred obscurity to fame. Perhaps young Master Dugu came from precisely such a hidden immortal clan. That assumption was also why the two opportunistic vagrant cultivators had dared to encourage young Master Dugu and Meng Long to visit the Lion Garden and help eliminate the fox demon. At this moment, young Master Dugu stood beside the window of their courtyard, gazing at the increasingly abnormal sky over the Lion Garden.
By the looks of it, that young man surnamed Chen has stepped on the fox demon's tail rather badly. This is even better. There's no need for us to interfere. Still, it's a pity about those 3 ancient relics from the Lion Garden. The painting and the plum blossom vase are both excellent pieces. I wonder whether that Chen fellow will sell them to us once they are in his hands.
Meng Long smiled. To her young master's priorities were as peculiar as ever.
Everyone who truly understands treasures is staring at that heirloom immortal treasure, wasting away in the Liu clan's hands. Yet you only care about those little objects worth a few immortal coins.
Young Master Dugu sighed, his eyes still resting on the distant sky.
Once this matter ends, we'll become busy again. You'll have to travel all over the place.
Meng Long's brows tightened. The road ahead was clearly troubling her as well.
Young master, searching for people and clues like this is no different from finding a needle in an endless sea. It really is difficult.
There isn't a simpler method. We can only continue using this clumsy approach. Why not treat it as a journey to relax while wander while waiting for news?
Meng Long's irritation finally surfaced.
The people willing to speak knew nothing useful. The ones who refused to speak all possess powerful backgrounds, and because we can't reveal our identities, we can't force them either. And those people from complete Reed continent act as though their noses point at the heavens, and their eyes look down upon the entire world. What is there to be so arrogant about? They've only lived several hundred years longer than us, so their cultivation happens to be somewhat higher. Give you 30 years, young master, and I say you could defeat them with one hand.
Young Master Dugu ignored the grumbling and cut directly to the true purpose of their journey.
We'll discuss everything after we find that young woman.
With nothing else to do, Meng Long sat beside the table and idly shuffled the stones scattered across the go-board.
All we have is a surname. That person was merely an unknown cultivator, with a low cultivation base, aboard Ceremony Mountain's intercontinental ship. These clues are nowhere near enough. If that traveling Buddhist monk hadn't mentioned her, we'd still be wandering without direction. Young master, I miss home. Don't trick me again. Once we find that cultivator, we absolutely have to pack up and return.
Young Master Dugu finally turned from the window, amusement appearing in his eyes.
Oakai refiner of the lower 5 tiers such as yourself actually dares to call someone else a minor cultivator.
But your maidservant is a sword cultivator.
Young Master Dugu widened his eyes in exaggerated indignation.
Sword cultivators are gluttons that devour money and ruin relationships. What is there to be proud of?
Meng Long covered her mouth, unable to suppress her laughter.
Others can say that, but you definitely can't. Besides, I'll earn back all the immortal money I've consumed in the future. Compared to your clan's wealth, isn't that amount negligible?
You won't say that once you truly enter the 5th tier. Along the cultivation path of an Earth Immortal Sword Cultivator, you'll consume at least twice the rare treasures required by an ordinary Earth Immortal.
Behind the teasing lay a harsh truth of cultivation. Sword cultivators might possess unrivaled killing power, but every step upward demanded immense resources. Talent opened the gate. Wealth determined how far that talent could travel.
My lord and milady certainly spend an outrageous amount of money. Otherwise, we wouldn't be any worse than old Dragon City's Fu clan.
Getting bold now, aren't you even criticizing my parents?
Because you're a good person, young master. So, what does this maidservant have to fear?
Young Master Dugu smiled, treating her words as another familiar exchange between master and servant.
A daughter married away is like water already splashed from the basin. Neither can be retrieved. This fate is unavoidable, and your young master is apparently the willing victim.
I'm not marrying anyone. Why would I marry some embroidered pillow that looks impressive, but has nothing inside? Thy's maidservant will follow her young master for life.
Young Master Dugu offered no response. His attention returned to the ominous heavens beyond the window.
The fox demon's actions are strange. There is something hidden beneath the surface, and it won't be easy to deal with. I only hope that the young man and the saber-wielding Daoist nun can dispose of it without too much trouble.
Young master, you truly possess the compassionate heart of a bodhisattva.
I merely want to spend some money and purchase those two objects. I'd rather not become entangled in this mess and be forced to fight. As for the fate of the Lion Garden and everyone connected to it, I have no interest. Whether their ending is fortunate or miserable, whether they live or die, all of it belongs to the fate they brought upon themselves.
Those words revealed another side of young Master Dugu. He could recognize danger, pity those caught within it, and still refuse responsibility for their fate. In the cultivation world, compassion and intervention were not always the same thing. Roughly an hour later, hurried footsteps finally approached Liu Qingqing's residence. Julian, old steward Zhao, and Liu Qingshan had returned, each carrying a specially prepared pot of gold ink about the size of an ordinary wine vessel. Inside Liu Qingqing's room, Shiru had already returned to Du Mao's immortal body and sat quietly in one corner with her eyes closed, calming her mind. Pei Qian had initially been frustrated that she could not transcribe texts here. Without something to occupy herself, simply waiting for danger to arrive felt unbearably dull. Fortunately, Zhao Ya found the talisman-wearing little girl interesting and moved closer to speak with her. Before long, she brought Pei Qian, who had been intensely curious but too embarrassed to ask, over to the table to examine the phoenix cage. For Pei Qian, it was an entirely new world compressed into a tiny space. Neither old steward Zhao nor Liu Qingshan entered Liu Qingqing's room. Both headed back toward the ancestral hall, and before leaving, Liu Qingshan respectfully bowed toward the second floor of his sister's residence. Inside, Chen Ping'an accepted the calligraphy brush. Julian stood beside him carrying a clay pot filled with shimmering gold ink, ready to serve as his ink holder. The talismans Chen Ping'an intended to draw came from the authentic death-avoiding book, the ancient volume Li Shisheng had once given him. He dipped the tip of the brush into the gold ink. No explanation was needed. Julian immediately stepped forward and lowered his shoulder.
Please go ahead, young master.
Chen Ping'an lightly tapped the ground and rose into the air, calligraphy brush still steady in his hand. He landed on Julian's shoulders as lightly as falling snow, and without hesitation drew a treasure pagoda demon-suppressing talisman along the edge of a column in one continuous stroke. Julian bent his knees. Chen Ping'an then gathered the spiritual energy accumulated within his Dao robe, golden sweet wine, as well as the energy of his water palace, and used a different method to inscribe another demon-suppressing talisman. When both men straightened, Chen Ping'an reached the roof beams and continued covering them in talismans. After stepping down from Julian's shoulders, he moved across the windows and walls, brush never remaining idle for long. The treasure pagoda demon-suppressing talisman was specifically intended to restrain the fox demon, but Chen Ping'an did not rely on a single method. He also drew calming talismans and cleansing talismans, two elementary talismans recorded within the authentic death-avoiding book, then placed several yang energy illumination talismans around the doorway. This was not careless over-preparation. Chen Ping'an did not know which demonic technique the fox would employ, so he layered different talisman effects across the room. When information about an enemy was incomplete, redundancy itself became a defensive strategy. Watching the relentless motion of the brush, Julian finally asked whether his young master needed a moment to recover.
Young master, do you need to rest for a moment?
The great demon may already be rushing here. There's no time to delay. The more talismans I can draw, the better.
Time passed. At last, every vital point inside Liu Qingqing's room had been reinforced. Yet Chen Ping'an had used only a little more than half a pot of gold ink. He immediately moved into the corridor and continued drawing demon-suppressing talismans across railings and benches. He even attempted several sword edict talismans and lock-slashing talismans, though these more difficult inscriptions still tested the limits of his current skill. Successfully forming a talismanic core was only the beginning. How long its spiritual aura endured, how well it resisted murderous aura, and how many powerful demonic techniques it could withstand were entirely different questions. A completed talisman was not automatically a powerful talisman. Chen Pingan resembled a farmer working stubbornly upon poor soil. If each plot could not produce a large harvest, then the answer was simple: plant more fields. Gold ink still remained. Chen Pingan stepped onto the railing and leaped onto the roof with Zhu Lian. The two crouched upon the ridge beneath the strange sky while the brush continued moving, one talisman after another appearing beneath Chen Pingan's hand. Below them, Pei Qian finally discovered an opportunity to boast. Not long after her master began covering the residence in talismans, she crossed her arms, lifted her chin, and turned toward Xiaoya.
Big Sister Yar, isn't my master amazing at drawing talismans? Look at these flower and bird talismans. Aren't they beautiful? Don't they look like something made by an incredibly powerful immortal?
Xiaoya was not a cultivator, and naturally could not judge the true level of Chen Pingan's talisman craft. Yet as Liu Qingqing's personal maidservant, she had considerable knowledge of music, go, calligraphy, and painting. Judged purely as written characters, the ancient script of the young immortal in white did not seem especially impressive. Still, she did not want to disappoint Pei Qian and offered a rather perfunctory compliment. Pei Qian bobbed her head with complete seriousness, quickly inventing an explanation that satisfied even herself.
You don't understand, Big Sister Yar. My master's writing is impressive because it has immortal kai.
Zhao Ya could not help smiling.
So that's how it is. Forgive my poor eyesight. I'm not an immortal from the mountains, after all, so I failed to notice the truly impressive part.
Pei Qian immediately realized that Zhao Ya was still humoring her. She secretly rolled her eyes, decided further explanation was wasted effort, and lay down beside the table to stare into the phoenix cage. Her large, curious eyes met countless tiny eyes inside. One spirit after another emerged from their residences and gathered together, equally fascinated by the tanned little visitor beyond their miniature world. Zhao Ya then returned to Liu Qingqing's side. Something about the room had changed.
Young mistress, do you feel it? The room seems brighter somehow. Even the air feels fresher. I don't feel anything.
There was pain in Liu Qingqing's voice. Zhao Ya quietly carried a chair beside her and took her mistress's ice-cold hands between her own. Soon afterward, Chen Pingan and Zhu Lian descended gracefully from the roof and landed in the corridor. Zhu Lian's hands were empty now. He turned toward Shiro and ordered her to take the remaining 2 pots of gold ink. Shiro did not understand what he intended, but she obeyed without argument. Zhu Lian was an 8th-tier martial artist, and at present she had neither the strength nor the confidence to provoke him. Not long before, within the courtyard, Zhu Lian had made no attempt to conceal the killing intent he directed toward her. The memory alone remained enough to make Shiro wary. The moment Pei Qian noticed the sweat covering Chen Pingan's face, she hurried toward him.
Master, do you need me to wipe away your sweat?
Chen Pingan smiled and shook his head.
I need to visit different places around the Lion Garden with Shiru and draw more talismans. If anything happens, those talismans will react. Zhu Lion will remain here to protect all of you. Even if the fox demon comes, as long as these talismans slow it down, I'll have enough time to hurry back.
Pei Qian confidently patted the bamboo saber and bamboo sword hanging at her side.
Don't worry, Master. I'll definitely protect young Mistress Liu and Big Sister Yar.
Chen Pingan reached out and gently patted her head.
Protect yourself first.
Pei Qian immediately broke into a brilliant smile. Zhu Lian watched silently, a faint smile appearing on his face. Earlier, while the 2 men were on the roof, Chen Pingan had quietly emphasized one thing above all else. Julian absolutely had to protect Pei Qian. That small instruction reassured Julian more than any grand speech about righteousness could have done. Chen Ping'an wanted to save others, but he had not become so obsessed with morality that he would sacrifice the person closest to him merely to appear virtuous. To Julian, that distinction mattered. Had his young master been a rigid moral sage, pursuing nothing but a place in Confucian temples, such self-righteousness would have been far more irritating than admirable. Chen Ping'an and Shi Ru then descended from the second floor and landed in the courtyard. Chen Ping'an took one pot of gold ink from her hands before giving his next instruction.
Go inform young Master Doogu's group, as well as that immortal couple. If they are willing to help, ask them to guard the ancestral hall. Ideally, they should choose a high position with a wide field of view. The fox demon may appear very soon.
Shi Ru departed without a word to deliver the message. Elsewhere in the Lion Garden, upon an arched bridge, the storm that everyone had been preparing for was already beginning to take shape. Two figures faced each other across the bridge. One was a handsome young man dressed in black robes. The other was a middle-aged Daoist nun carrying a saber. The black-robed young man placed one hand upon the stone railing. With a surge of force, the solid structure crumbled beneath his palm and scattered into dust.
Thinking nun, are you truly determined to stand in my way?
The Daoist nun stood directly upon the railing, utterly unmoved by the display of power. She merely shook her head.
Stand in your way, no. I'm here to kill you and take your treasures.
For the first time, the fox demon's expression shifted. The Daoist nun from the Daoist saber room gave a cold laugh.
A demon dares to covet the fortune of the human world. You've crossed the line by far more than a little.
Unlike Chen Ping'an, who was building layer upon layer of defenses, this saber-wielding Daoist nun chose the most direct solution possible. Find the demon, draw the boundary, and cut down whatever had crossed it. Different paths, same enemy. The fox demon clenched his teeth, yet instead of attacking immediately, he threw out a question heavy with implication.
Aren't you curious why a demon like me can scheme openly in the capital of the Azure Phoenix Nation, directly beneath the Emperor's nose?
The question carried a dangerous possibility. Perhaps the fox demon's confidence did not come from cultivation alone. If it could operate so boldly in the heart of a nation, then the shadow behind this affair might stretch far beyond the Lion Garden. The Daoist nun simply rested one hand upon the hilt of her saber. Whatever hidden politics, agreements, or mortal complications the demon hoped to use as leverage, none of them seemed capable of moving her.
Such mortal trivialities are of no concern to me.
On the arch bridge of the Lion Garden, the handsome young man wearing a fox demon's appearance suddenly turned his gaze toward the middle-aged Daoist nun before him. Calling himself Master Qing, he tested her identity with a seemingly casual question.
Hey, foreign woman, are you really a Daoist nun from the renowned Daoist saber room?
Liu Boqi seemed mildly amused. One hand remained on the hilt of her saber, while a finger lightly flicked the lotus-shaped hat resting upon her head. There was no tension in her posture, only the effortless calm of someone who had already decided how this encounter would end.
Why has someone been impersonating me in the Eastern Treasured Vial continent? Tell me their name. Consider it a meritorious contribution, and I may grant you a quick, less painful death.
The black-robed young man who had single-handedly stirred chaos throughout the Lion Garden clicked his tongue. His smile remained insolent, but his words revealed exactly what kind of creature Liu Boqi was facing. One that regarded even a golden core cultivator as food.
So you really are from the Daoist saber room. I wonder whether swallowing your precious golden core would stuff me to death.
The corners of Liu Boqi's mouth lifted. To her, the arrogance before her was almost amusing.
As expected of the smallest continent in the majestic world, whether inside the mountains or beyond them. Anyone with even a distant connection to Kai raffiners becomes unbearably arrogant despite possessing so little strength. My name is Boqi. I came here because the people of the Lion Garden also bear the surname Liu. My luck has been dreadful for quite some time, yet it seems to have finally improved. For that, I should thank you. So before you die, I'll at least allow a slug demon like you to understand why.
The young man's expression changed instantly. The disguise that had fooled so many eyes had been pierced with a single sentence. No matter how furiously the demon searched its memories, it could not understand where the flaw had appeared. What the slug demon did not know was that Boqi's vision had already revealed something even more astonishing. The vermilion wine gourd hanging at Chen waist was protected by an illusion capable of concealing its true nature even from ordinary golden core earth immortals. Yet once Boqi circulated her mystical powers, she recognized it immediately as a high-quality sword-nurturing gourd. That single observation established the true difference between Boqi and the local powers of the Lion Garden. The slug demon's disguise had not suddenly grown weaker. It had simply encountered someone whose eyesight, inheritance, and experience stood on an entirely different level. Boqi's voice remained as calm as stagnant winter water.
That willow tree spirit is practically blind. You entered and left the Lion Garden repeatedly, yet she never recognized your true form. A fox's scent and a few strands of fox fur were enough to make her believe you were genuinely a fox demon. You deceived everyone, and the damage you caused was considerable. And whoever has been secretly supporting you is no less blind. Otherwise, they would have skinned you and taken that fox fur disguise long ago. What does the downfall of the Liu clan amount to when compared with the treasures contained inside your body?
The demon had once boasted that even a nascent tier cultivator hunting it would not inspire fear. But now, for the first time, genuine nervousness surfaced beneath its handsome mask.
If I leave the Lion Garden right now, will you let me go?
Boqi did not answer. The question was apparently too foolish to deserve one. Instead, her palm lightly tapped the saber hilt at her waist.
This Dao saber that accompanies me everywhere is called jianghu. Among the sabers of Stalactite Mountain's Daoist saber room, it ranks 17th. My bonded item is also a saber. Its name is jianghu, but rest assured you won't have the fortune to see it. You should consider yourself extremely lucky.
At those words, the slug demon nearly lost control of its legs. Jianghu was already enough to make its heart sink. The mention of an unseen bonded saber only deepened the pressure. The threat here did not come from Boqi shouting or releasing overwhelming killing intent. It came from certainty. She calmly listed her weapons because in her eyes the demon was already prey. Cornered, the demon immediately changed tactics. Pride vanished. Excuses poured out instead.
That fox demon I ate was no good creature! It wanted to use marriage to attain the Tao and form a golden core. It also intended to slowly consume the Liu clan's fortune, and it was even delusional enough to dream about participating in the imperial examination. By killing it and swallowing it in one gulp, I actually helped the Lion Garden avoid a calamity. Later, an esteemed old immortal from the Azure Phoenix nation coveted the imperial seal, inherited by the Liu clan from a fallen empire. He joined forces with an immensely powerful figure in the capital's imperial court. I merely followed the current so all three sides could obtain what they wanted. It was nothing more than a trivial transaction. Miss Daoist none. Someone as mighty as you should surely be magnanimous. Just let me go. If I disturbed your sightseeing, I can compensate you with the fox demon's half-formed golden core. What do you say?
Boqi chuckled softly. The pleading had not moved her in the slightest.
Are you pretending to be foolish because you believe I absolutely cannot find your true body?
The young man's pitiful expression disappeared. In an instant, humility transformed back into mockery. He threw away the facade of submission and burst into loud laughter.
Oh ho ho! Exclamation impressive. Thinky woman! Exclamation, you're not quite as stupid as I thought. Daoist saber room, so watching God from stalactite mountain, and what of it don't forget where you are. This is the eastern treasured vile continent, the Azure Phoenix nation, right beside the cloud forest Jiang clan. I offered you a way out and you refused. Then hurry to the capital and pray to every god and Buddha you can find. If you fall into my hands again in the eastern treasured vile continent, I'll make you regret ever crossing, Master King.
Surprisingly, Liu Boqi showed no anger. The more viciously the demon cursed, the more entertained she appeared.
There is indeed truth in the saying that the smaller the temple, the fiercer the demonic winds. Speaking with a slug demon like you is rather interesting. I've encountered powerful demons and fiends who dropped to their knees the moment I drew my saber. I've also seen those who screamed threats until the instant death arrived. Compared with them, your reaction is much more entertaining.
The handsome face remained arrogant, yet the creature behind it was growing increasingly uneasy. Liu Boqi was not someone who normally wasted words. If she was standing here chatting instead of cutting it down, then perhaps the conversation itself was buying time for something. The slug demon's suspicion was reasonable. Experienced survivors do not fear only swords, they fear unexplained patience. When an enemy who should attack chooses to wait, the waiting itself becomes a weapon. Still, the demon possessed a hidden advantage. No one knew it had secretly tampered with the body of the willow tree spirit, the mountain lord of the Lion Garden. Through that connection, any obvious change to the garden's feng shui would immediately reach its senses. If Liu Qingqing's residence concealed a formation or trap, the demon could simply suppress its appetite. It did not need to devour the scholarly fortune within the young woman immediately. Demons had time. It could wait. Could Liu Boqi and the sword-carrying young man truly remain in the Lion Garden for half a year? For an entire year? The demon was prepared to gamble on patience. And yet one question refused to leave its mind. What exactly was Liu Boqi relying on? Why had the woman who once obliterated its illusory body without hesitation suddenly become so calm? Liu Boqi finally stepped aside. Standing upon the railing of the arch bridge, she extended one hand and openly invited the demon to cross. She would not block the road.
Go to the young lady's residence. Once you arrive, you'll understand.
Before she moved aside, the demon had desperately wanted to charge across the bridge and inspect Liu Qingqing's residence. But now that the path stood completely open, the small arch bridge suddenly seemed like a mountain of blades hanging over a sea of fire. Ghosts and demons were terrifying, but a human mind that deliberately opened the road you wished to take could be even worse. Liu Boqi had transformed permission itself into pressure. The slug demon had survived for a very long time, and survival had taught it caution through repeated painful losses. Without those setbacks, it might already have approached the threshold of the upper 5 tiers. Its handsome form was nothing but stolen clothing. It had devoured a fox demon and turned the fox's skin into the foundation of an illusion. Yet its true species was far rarer and far more valuable. The creature was a treasure creation demon. Heaven and earth revolved, and myriad things were born. Ordinary slugs already faced tremendous difficulty becoming spirits. For one to awaken, cultivate, and then become a treasure creation demon was rarer still. Slug demons fed upon spirits, ghosts, and fiends. Their greatest mystery, however, was not disguise, concealment, escape, or even their extraordinary resistance to being killed by immortal treasures. Their cultivation path could absorb portions of the cultivation fortune belonging to the beings they devoured. Using the original demon core as a gateway, they could cultivate several paths in parallel and eventually condense multiple golden cores. In practical terms, such a creature was a land-dwelling, treasure-swallowing whale. Every being it consumed could become another layer of accumulated fortune. That was why killing one was not merely demon suppression. It could mean obtaining an astonishing windfall. That was the deeper reason Liu Boqi refused to let this earth immortal escape. Even someone as proud as her could not ignore a treasure-filled slug demon. And should the young man surnamed Chen dare compete for the spoils, Jing God at her waist and her bonded ancient saber, Jianghu would not distinguish friend from rival. Watching the demon glance around with obvious caution, Liu Boqi smiled.
I know your true body is hidden deep underground somewhere nearby. You've placed yourself close to either a mountain root or a water vein, so your aura merges with the surroundings and escapes my senses.
The demon cocked its head. A trace of confidence returned.
If you're so powerful, why not simply draw your saber and tear through everything around us? There aren't many mountain roots or water veins here. A few minutes of indiscriminate attacks should be enough to force me out. So why aren't you doing it? There must be something else you're worried about, right?
A moment later, it supplied its own answer.
Slug, I may have guessed something. These past few days, I've paid far more attention to you than to that young master whose maidservant is a sword cultivator.
Liu Boqi's eyes narrowed. The demon immediately raised both hands, laughing as though it had finally grasped her weakness.
I know you won't allow me to finish saying it. Come on, then. Use your saber. Show me how decisive you are! Exclamation. The green mountains remain, and the rivers continue to flow. One day, you'll pay for what you've done.
The response came exactly as predicted. Liu Boqi drew her saber. One flash crossed the bridge, and the slug demon's illusory body was torn apart before it could utter another word. Just as before, no corpse remained. Only a single strand of fox fur drifted gently toward the ground. Liu Boqi lifted her gaze. Around the lion garden, green mountains rose quietly beneath the sky. For a fleeting instant, the poetic image of green mountains entered her thoughts. Green mountains associated with a noble character, and a feeling that arrived as suddenly as love at first sight. A faint blush touched Liu Boqi's cheeks. Fortunately, no one was nearby to witness it, and her slightly tanned complexion made the change difficult to notice. She immediately pushed those thoughts aside. The cold, distant expression returned, as if nothing had happened. Standing upon the bridge, Liu Boqi sensed faint strands of aura circulating through the lion garden and quietly waited. The treasure-filled slug demon was about to suffer a tremendous setback. And now, the reason for her earlier patience became clearer. Liu Boqi was not merely hunting. She was coordinating the battlefield, using pressure above ground to create time for someone else to act where the demon could not see. Helping another while helping herself, Liu Boqi drew Jing God once more. The Dao saber was famed within the Daoist saber room, and now its edge began moving throughout the lion garden. Her figure flashed from location to location. Each strike was deliberate. Some severed the connections between mountain roots and water veins. Others stabbed into places most suitable for concealment. At the same time, she intentionally stirred the surrounding astral energy, making enough commotion to churn the lion garden's feng shui into temporary chaos. Every saber strike brought another moment for the young man in white with the sword-nurturing gourd hanging from his waist. Slug demons were notoriously troublesome. Killing them was often easier than capturing them. Faced with such a slippery opponent, even Liu Boqi had to endure this tedious method and patiently squeeze the creature's hiding space smaller and smaller. Elsewhere in the lion garden, outside a tightly sealed study, another handsome young man suddenly materialized. With both hands clasped behind his back, the slug demon violently kicked the door open and strode inside, as though the entire residence belonged to him. It sniffed the air. The atmosphere here felt slightly unfamiliar.
I truly don't know what extraordinary deeds the Liu clan's ancestors performed to accumulate this much scholarly force. It flows through the entire lion garden without scattering. No wonder that Dragon Gate tier fox demon wanted to share. What a pity. Its fate was terrible, and all that effort ultimately benefited someone else.
The demon began searching immediately. It tapped shelves, touched walls, examined furniture, and repeatedly stomped the floor to test whether any hidden mechanism or secret chamber lay beneath the study. Finding nothing of that sort, it turned toward the places where valuables would ordinarily be concealed and rummaged through them one after another. The treasure should have been hidden somewhere inside this study. Behind the calamity afflicting the Lion Garden stood two powerful masterminds, and the Slug demon had already dealt with both. One possessed a frightening cultivation base. The other commanded immense worldly power and influence. Even the Slug demon preferred not to interact with either more than necessary. One of them was an old cultivator from the Azure Phoenix nation, who delighted in collecting imperial seals left behind by fallen states. His aquiline nose sharpened an already sinister face, and when he smiled, he appeared more unsettling than many ghosts. A saying from the school of naturalists suited him perfectly, an eagle-beak nose made to peck into the hearts of others. The strange old cultivator followed a path connected to supporting imperial clans, and nothing delighted him more than gathering surviving relics of extinct kingdoms. The closer an artifact dated to the year of a dynasty's fall, the more precious it became in his eyes, and the higher the price he was prepared to pay. Rumor claimed he had already collected nearly 100 imperial seals belonging to rulers from different nations and eras. His collection was astonishingly complete, yet two regrets still gnawed at him. First, one imperial seal belonging to a larger matching set remained missing. Rumors placed it somewhere around Wasptail Ferry Station. Yet that location contained an alley that had once produced an upper 5-tier cultivator. Apparently wary of the consequences, the old man did not dare disguise himself, and simply march into Wasptail Ferry Station to seize the seal. His second regret was much closer at hand. For years he had dearly coveted a treasure preserved by the Lion Garden through generation after generation. The relic was said to have once accompanied an emperor during an inspection tour. In an earlier age it had been a paramount treasure, belonging to a fallen nation, once located in the southern regions of the eastern treasured Vile continent. It was surprisingly small, only 2 inches long and 2 inches wide, and fashioned from gold. Yet someone had boldly engraved upon that little golden block words declaring that it encompassed heaven and earth, received hidden assistance from the gods, glittered like golden armor, and accompanied autumn hunts across the realm. A relic like this was valuable for far more than its material. It carried the lingering weight of a fallen dynasty, imperial authority, history, and fortune. For cultivators walking unusual paths, such accumulated meaning could be worth far more than ordinary gold or treasure. As it searched, the Slug demon occasionally glanced through the window. Sure enough, Boqi had not given up. She was using the crudest and most time-consuming method imaginable, striking through the garden while attempting to locate its real body. The demon smirked.
Exclamation, it would truly be impressive if that stinky woman actually managed to find me.
Its confidence came from an unlikely source, a martial arts novel it had once read. One particular idea had remained firmly lodged in its mind. Sometimes the most dangerous place was precisely the safest. The more it had reflected on that principle, the more reasonable it had seemed. Yet despite its smugness, impatience gradually crept in. The little golden block remained nowhere to be found.
That cripple Liu Qingshan really knows how to hide things.
Even if it discovered the treasure, the Slug demon could not easily remove it under the present circumstances. Still, merely seeing the object with its own eyes would have satisfied some of its curiosity. The situation was almost absurd. By forming connections with the feng shui of the Lion Garden, the creature had gained extraordinary concealment and influence here, yet those very ties now prevented it from casually picking up the small golden block. It could forcibly take the treasure if it ignored the consequences, but for a demon, that kind of recklessness was unnecessary. Time was the one resource it possessed in abundance. That patience was not cowardice. For long-lived demons, survival itself was a cultivation strategy. Humans might gamble everything on a single decade, while a demon capable of waiting another century could simply allow danger to pass. Perhaps such longevity was heaven's compensation for how difficult the demon path could be. Merely becoming a spirit and awakening intelligence formed the first barrier. Shape-shifting into human form and cultivating properly formed another. After that came a third obstacle, obtaining a hidden immortal scripture that truly opened a road toward the great Tao, or enjoying extraordinary fortune and receiving official recognition from a mighty orthodox lineage. Historical records told of an unbelievably fortunate upper five-tier fox demon connected to the Heavenly Master residence on Mount Longhu. After the Heavenly Master seal was gently pressed against its fur, the fox demon gained enough protection to pass the terrifying lightning tribulation that descended when a cultivator attempted to break beyond the nascent tier and step into the upper 5 tiers. What should have been a succession of nearly insurmountable gulfs became something the fox demon crossed with astonishing ease. Which demon beneath the majestic world's heavens would not envy such fortune? The slug demon had only heard the tale through gossip, yet even remembering it made envy rise within its heart. As it continued searching the study, its gaze accidentally landed upon 2 couplets hanging high on the walls. They had been written by Liu Qingshan. Whether the words were his own or copied from some ancient sage, the slug demon could not tell. It had never read many books. One couplet spoke of a scholar's brush commanding a formation of 1,000 soldiers, while his poetry summoned the might of 10,000 cavalry. The other spoke of upholding virtue to stand beside the sages and gathering books so future generations could be educated. The first possessed an imposing spirit that seemed ready to surge beyond the paper. The second concealed its strength inwardly, steady and restrained. Even with its shallow learning, the slug demon could recognize that much. Then it raised its head and spat at both couplets. The demon erupted into delighted laughter. For this creature, few sights were more satisfying than watching a diligent scholar, especially one talented and still in the prime of life, be dragged from dignity into ruin. That moment exposed the ugliness beneath the slug demon's cleverness. Its schemes were not driven by survival alone. It took genuine pleasure in seeing another person's promise, reputation, and scholarly spirit trampled into the mud. Yet, while it laughed inside Liu Qingshan's study, Liu Boqi was still outside, cutting through mountain roots and disturbing water veins. The demon believed the most dangerous place was the safest. But the greater question was whether someone else had already understood exactly how it thought. The slug demon swaggered past the study desk, sweeping its gaze over brushes, ornaments, paperweights, and the elegant little treasures favored by scholars. Then it dropped heavily into the chair, leaned back, shifted from side to side, and immediately found something else to despise. In its eyes, scholars were an incomprehensible breed. They filled rooms with refined objects, wrote lofty essays about governing the world, yet somehow failed to produce a chair that allowed a fellow to sit comfortably without straightening his back like a spear. After muttering another string of curses, the demon stared into empty space. Its thoughts drifted toward the other terrifying figure behind the calamity weighing upon the Liu clan, the old man from the Imperial Tang clan, an existence with tremendous influence in the Azure Phoenix nation. That old man had hated Liu Jingting for years. And that was precisely what the slug demon could not understand. Even an outsider like itself knew that Liu Jingting was widely regarded as an upright and capable official, a pillar of the imperial court. During the previous 2 years alone, Countless scholars had journeyed south to the Azure Phoenix Nation because of Assistant Minister Liu's reputation. The mystery was not whether Liu Jingting possessed enemies. Any official who stood too firmly would create enemies. The strange part was why a man of such standing had become a mortal foe in the eyes of the Emperor's own uncle. That hatred carried the scent of something deeper than ordinary disagreement. Unable to make sense of it, the Slug demon remembered a conversation from the end of the previous year. Back then, it had hidden atop a roof beam in the Lion Garden and secretly listened to Liu Jingting drinking with his 2 sons. As expected of Liu Jingting, even wine could not pull his thoughts away from the nation and its people. His eldest son spoke of curious experiences from his travels through officialdom, while Liu Qingshan bluntly criticized the ugliness he saw in society. Among those who hated Assistant Minister Liu most bitterly, however, many were not political opponents at all. Some were scholars who had once tried to attach themselves to Liu Jingting, hoping his name would lift their own careers. When their flattery gained them nothing, admiration curdled into resentment. Others had argued fiercely with Liu Jingting's disciples in the literary world. Their debates ended in humiliation, their faces burned with embarrassment, and embarrassment slowly hardened into rage. Before long, the man they could not defeat with words became the man they most wished to despise. This was one of the cruelest truths surrounding Liu Jingting. He did not need to insult people in order to wound their pride. He simply refused to value rank, birth, reputation, or shameless praise. And to those who desperately wanted acknowledgement, being ignored could feel more unbearable than being openly rejected. Liu Jingting himself only came to understand this after leaving the imperial court and returning home. During a conversation about officialdom, his eldest son, the county magistrate, whom outsiders considered far less impressive than Liu Qingshan, explained the matter plainly. Faced with such an absurd explanation for so much hostility, Liu Jingting had found no suitable reply. He merely raised his cup and drained the wine in a single swallow. Liu Qingshan, meanwhile, had little patience for such complexities. He turned on his elder brother and criticized him without restraint, despite the fact that the 2 brothers had always shared a close relationship. His elder brother did not become angry. He had long since grown accustomed to Liu Qingshan's temper.
I have already entered the imperial court and been changed by it. I only hope that you will not repeat my mistakes one day.
Father and sons, elder brother and younger brother. Whatever storms raged beyond the Lion Garden, the Liu household itself remained bound by affection and duty. Then an unexpected thought entered the Slug demon's mind. Could the fox demon it had devoured truly have wanted to become part of the Liu clan? Perhaps its desire to participate in the imperial examinations had not been a passing whim. Perhaps it had dreamed of entering officialdom and the literary world through Liu Jingting's family, eventually adding its own strength to the scholarly fortune of the clan. If that suspicion was correct, then the fox demon had not merely been seeking cultivation or status, it had been reaching toward a place within human society. Yet the slug demon had never bothered to ask. Power had met weakness, hunger had met prey, and the answer had disappeared into its stomach. At the time, of course, the slug demon had considered none of this. The fox demon had not even formed a golden core. To the slug demon he'd been a satisfying meal, so satisfying that it no longer remembered how many times it had burped afterward. Its attention suddenly shifted. Somewhere beyond the study, it sensed the saber strikes of that detestable Daoist nun crashing against defenses she could not overcome.
You're ugly enough to suit a cripple perfectly.
The insult carried plenty of venom, but no heavenly authority. The slug demon was no Confucian sage, whose words could become celestial decree, so nothing changed merely because it had spoken. It sighed, withdrew its attention, and began lazily examining the supposedly worthless objects scattered across the desk. Then its eyes widened. Beside a long wooden paperweight sat a small box, The slug demon reached out and touched it. Heat exploded against its fingers. The demon jerked its hand back, and instead of anger, delight flashed across its face.
Well done, Liu Kengshen. So you were hiding something after all.
Inside the ancestral hall of the Liu clan, another kind of tension had settled like invisible dust. Of the two teachers employed by the Liu clan's private school, the elderly Mr. Fu remained beside Liu Jingting.
Mr. Fu, I am sorry that my family's trouble has dragged you into this.
Mr. Fu merely shook his head. Outside of teaching, the old man almost never spoke. His expression seldom changed, and nearly everyone in the Lion Garden felt an instinctive unease around him. The other teacher, the middle-aged Confucian scholar known as Mr. Liu, was hardly gentle either. He imposed even more rules than Mr. Fu, and almost every descendant or servant who had studied at the private school had tasted his lectures or punishments. Yet strangely, they still preferred approaching Mr. Liu to standing before the silent Mr. Fu. At that moment, Mr. Liu quietly waited at the entrance of the ancestral hall for Liu Qingshan's return. When Liu Qingshan finally returned from Liu Qingqing's residence unharmed, the scholar's face remained unreadable. Liu Qingshan limped forward and bowed respectfully. Mr. Liu answered only with a small nod. Liu Qingshan entered the hall and went to his father's side. Mr. Liu remained near the entrance. His gaze drifted toward the scripture library, where two figures were walking nearby, the young master from the eastern treasured vial continent and his attendant. A moment later, he turned around and walked back into the ancestral hall. Perhaps he had failed to see clearly. Perhaps he had seen perfectly and decided that some things were safer left unseen. In a garden filled with demons, cultivators, hidden experts, and old grudges, knowing when not to look could itself be a kind of wisdom. Beneath the eaves of the scripture library, Menglong leaned against the corridor railing and looked toward the ancestral hall with a smile.
Young master, do you think Fu Sheng and that man surnamed Liu are like us good? They also be extraordinary experts.
Young Master Dugu was visibly amused.
Before answering, explain something to me. Since when did we become extraordinary experts?
Menglong merely smiled knowingly and rested her arms upon the railing. Her young master could call it modesty if he wished. Within the eastern treasured vial continent, people of their background and strength were hardly ordinary. Menglong came from the luminous Vermilion Empire, the nation famed for possessing more sword cultivators than any other realm on the continent. Its strength stretched across more than a dozen vassal states. Several imperial descendants had abandoned any claim to the throne in order to pursue the sword Dao. One of them had reached the 10th tier and challenged Li Tuanjing of Wind Lightning Field 3 separate times. He lost all 3 battles, yet no one dared call him weak. Li Tuanjing had once stood as the mightiest nascent tier cultivator in the eastern treasured vial continent. With one sword, he had suppressed sun-scorched mountain for centuries. Among the earth immortals of the continent, how many could confidently receive even one of his strikes? The 10th tier swordsman's 3 defeats therefore revealed something more impressive than an undefeated record. Li Tuanjing had agreed to fight him again and again. For a swordsman standing at that height, accepting a second and third challenge was itself acknowledgement of an opponent worth drawing the sword against. 2 other imperial descendants had reached the 9th tier. They too surrendered their chances at the throne, ignored the restrictions of their shared imperial bloodline, and became a couple. They eventually separated themselves from the luminous Vermilion Empire, at least publicly, and rarely appeared before outsiders, choosing instead to cultivate the sword Dao in seclusion. Rumor claimed that the elderly emperor had secretly entrusted the national treasury to this pair. Their close ties with several great clans of Old Dragon City supposedly helped keep the empire's coffers overflowing. Menglong's expression darkened as her thoughts shifted northward.
Those cultivators from the northern complete reed continent are unbearably arrogant, especially that damned heavenly lord from the Daoist sect.
Young Master Dugu answered with a faint smile, but his words cut directly through her indignation.
Are we any different in the eyes of the demons and fiends we defeated? Did every servant or maid who died because of your wandering yin soul truly deserve death? Of course not. We simply never cared enough to concern ourselves with them.
Menglong had no answer. She could only vent her frustration by kicking the corridor railing with the tip of her foot. Young Master Dugu's reply exposed the uncomfortable symmetry of power. The strong often condemn arrogance only when they are the ones forced to endure it. From below, every lofty cultivator can look like the same distant mountain. Elsewhere, Chen Ping'an had already left Liu Qingqing's residence. He did not waste time drawing more talismans there. Instead, he headed straight for the main entrance of the Lion Garden. The two colourful door gods guarding the entrance had almost completely exhausted their spiritual power. Whatever protection they had once provided the Liu clan was nearing its end. Chen Ping'an quietly apologized to them, then lifted his brush. Upon the two massive entrance doors, he began drawing treasure pagoda demon-suppressing talismans. These were nothing like the smaller talismans he had used around Liu Qingqing's residence. Each enormous talisman was completed without interruption, the lines flowing in one continuous breath. Their structure was grand, their spiritual bearing solemn, and their talismanic cores appeared full and complete. Shiru watched silently from behind and gave a faint nod of approval. Her judgment was simple. Chen Ping'an's technique had already surpassed the tools in his hands. With a finer brush and superior gold ink, the same talismanic cores could have carried even greater force. The limitation was not his foundation, but his materials. After finishing the two great talismans, Chen Ping'an stepped back beside Shiru and examined them carefully. Only after confirming that there were no flaws did he begin walking along the paved path beside the Lion Garden's outer wall. Every 50 paces or so he stopped and drew another talisman.
When I'm drawing, I have to focus completely. I may not notice that demon the moment it appears. Keep watch carefully.
Protecting you is already my responsibility. Besides, my own life is tied to this matter. I have no intention of being careless. Master.
Chen Ping'an glanced back at her, and the edge of his next remark carried unmistakable ridicule.
If someone suffers poverty for too long and becomes terrified of being poor, do you think they become stingy after suddenly becoming rich?
Shiru heard the mockery perfectly well, yet offered no retort. It was not guilt that silenced her. It was the memory of the piece of paper Kui Dongshan had given her through Zhu Lian's folded paper horse. Only a few words had been written upon it.
Don't court deaths, young lady.
The sentence looked almost playful, yet Shiro's immortal body had reacted with an involuntary chill. Chen Ping'an continued drawing with astonishing speed. Every movement revealed repetition refined through countless hours of practice. Whoever had taught him talisman techniques was clearly no ordinary master. Shiro also had to acknowledge Chen Ping'an's resilience. His breathing, posture, mind, and energy remained remarkably stable, and that stability was precisely what allowed each talisman stroke to retain its intended force. Among talisman cultivators, the saying that drawing talismans exhausted the mind was no empty phrase. A single distracted breath could ruin the flow. A slight disturbance in intent could weaken the core. Chen Ping'an was not merely writing symbols. He was holding his mind steady while continuously imprinting spiritual structure onto the world. When Chen Ping'an completed another talisman, Shiru seized the brief interval to lean against the wall. Her breathing had quickened.
Master, are you arranging a formation?
Chen Ping'an immediately glared at her and raised a finger to his lips. Secret. He shuffled forward, then actually turned around to glare at her a second time. This was no feigned annoyance. Chen Ping'an genuinely seemed irritated that she had spoken his intention aloud. Shiro obediently followed while carrying 2 clay pots filled with thick gold ink. The sight of Chen Ping'an actually becoming flustered amused her enough that the corners of her lips almost rose. She suppressed the smile before it fully appeared. The lion garden covered a large area to secretly encircle its entire perimeter with talismans before the great demon sensed anything wrong required relentless effort. Chen Ping'an could not slow down. Every stroke had to be precise, every pause brief, every talisman completed before the enemy realized that an invisible net was tightening around the estate. This was a battle before the battle. No blades had crossed, yet Chen Ping'an was already spending concentration, true chi, talismans, gold ink, and time to seize the terrain. His strategy was simple in principle and costly in execution. If the demon was dangerous enough to threaten him, then he would first make the lion garden itself hostile to the demon. For Shiro, this was also a new glimpse of the man she followed. Unlike Julian and the others from the picture scrolls, she had not accompanied Chen Ping'an through one dangerous event after another, nor crossed vast distances between continents at his side. Her understanding of his true strength and temperament remained incomplete. What she did understand very well was his astonishing wealth. A Yang avatar belonging to an Ascension tier immortal, a disciple like Kuai Dongshan. Either fact alone would have been enough to make ordinary cultivators question what sort of background Chen Ping'an truly possessed. And now this same man intended to imprison a great demon inside the lion garden and beat it down on ground of his own choosing. Connecting this with everything Chen Ping'an had said and done in the ancestral hall and at Liu Qingqing's residence, Shiro finally felt genuine admiration. He was meticulous to an almost frightening degree. Wise men were said to avoid standing beneath unstable walls. Chen Ping'an was different. If circumstances forced him beneath such a wall, he would first find an umbrella, then a bamboo hat, then armor, then reinforce the ground beneath his feet, and only after exhausting every precaution would he look up at the falling stones. That caution was not cowardice. It was the habit of someone who understood that surviving one more battle mattered more than looking heroic for a single moment. Against a great demon, preparation itself was part of cultivation. Chen Ping'an naturally had no interest in guessing what Shiro was thinking. Other matters demanded his attention, and whatever problems remained with Shiro could be left for Kuai Dongshan to handle later. At last, Chen Ping'an completed a full circuit around the lion garden and finished the final talisman. He looked at his work. Still not enough. So he began walking around the garden a second time. This time, Chen Ping'an took out talismans he had drawn long ago, but never found an opportunity to use. Their quality varied, but he no longer cared. He poured true chi into them one after another and pasted them across the outer wall. There would be no profit from this endeavor. If anything, Chen Ping'an was practically throwing money at the lion garden's walls. But once he had decided that the demon needed to be contained, thrift became secondary. This was another revealing aspect of Chen Ping'an's temperament. He could count every coin carefully in peaceful times, yet when survival demanded expenditure, he was willing to burn resources without hesitation. When the preparations were finally complete, Chen Ping'an leaped onto the top of the wall. Looking at all the resources he had just spent, an extremely unreasonable thought crossed his mind. When he returned, he definitely needed to find some excuse to twist Pei Qian's ear. She was his first disciple, after all. Surely a master was permitted a little unreasonableness now and then. Chen Ping'an stretched lazily and looked toward the distant mountains. Spring was already nearing its end. Beneath the clear sky, the green mountains seemed sharper and more distinct than before. Shiro stood beside him, still carrying the 2 clay pots of gold ink. She could not quite understand the peculiar expression on his face. Chen Pingan reached both hands behind his shoulders and interlocked his fingers, allowing his palms to rest perfectly against the hilt of the sword strapped across his back. An immortal sword already travelled with him, but when would he finally become a true sword immortal? His thoughts drifted back to an earlier journey aboard an intercontinental ship. Looking down upon a region of the eastern treasured vile continent, someone beside him had pointed toward the land below and identified it as the luminous Vermilion Empire, the empire with the greatest number of sword cultivators on the continent. Yet she had also told him that even such a nation was nothing compared with her homeland. If Chen Pingan ever had the chance, she said, he should travel to the northern complete reed continent and see it himself. Only then would he understand what it meant for a land to possess more sword cultivators than anywhere else in the world, not merely more than anywhere else on one continent. For a young man carrying an immortal sword, yet still wondering when he might truly deserve the title of Sword Immortal, that northern continent was more than a destination. It represented a horizon filled with stronger swords, greater opponents, and answers that could only be found by travelling farther. Chen Pingan was genuinely eager to see that place one day. But the Lion Garden was still before him, and the great demon was still inside. He pushed thoughts of distant continents aside and reached for the sword-nurturing gourd named Jianghu. Chen Pingan raised it to his lips. Not a single drop of wine came out. For a man who had just surrounded an entire estate with demon-suppressing talismans, this tiny misfortune was somehow extremely awkward. He quietly tied the empty gourd back to his waist, pretending that nothing had happened and hoping Shiru had failed to notice. Unfortunately for him, Shiro noticed everything.
Master, should I fetch you a pot of wine?
Chen Pingan shook his head. Then he stomped his foot. In the next instant, the talismans covering the Lion Garden's outer wall awakened one after another. Spiritual light surged from their talismanic cores. One point of brilliance answered another, then another, until golden radiance raced around the entire estate, as though every talisman had simultaneously received its master's decree. The white walls blazed. Golden light connected into a vast unbroken circuit, coiling around the Lion Garden from every direction. From afar, it seemed as though a colossal golden flood dragon had descended from the heavens and wrapped its luminous body around the entire estate. The trap was no longer hidden. Chen Pingan had spent his talismans, his true chi, his gold ink, and his concentration to turn the Lion Garden into a cage. From this moment onward, the question was no longer whether the great demon would discover his preparations. The question was whether it could break them before Chen Pingan drew his sword. After the sudden disturbance beyond the outer wall of the Lion Garden, the first figure to rise above the courtyards was Daoist Nun Liu Boqi. She landed upon a pavilion roof with effortless control, her gaze sweeping across the estate before she gave a faint nod. For someone as demanding as her, that tiny gesture was already rare praise. Liu Boqi cultivated at the Daoist saber room of Stalactite Mountain, a place where strange encounters and extraordinary cultivators were almost commonplace. The great heavenly lord there regarded her as a prodigy worthy of enormous expectations. She had even travelled across the seas beside senior cultivators, hunting ancient flood dragons weakened after commanding regional reigns. A woman who had witnessed creatures and experts of that level would never be impressed by ordinary tricks. Her approval meant Chen Pingan's talisman methods had truly caught the eye of an expert. Elsewhere, Julianne stood beside the corridor railing. Pei Qian, balanced on top of it, stared toward the distant wall with curiosity blazing in her eyes.
Was that my master?
Julianne smiled. He had already seen Chen Pingan use talismans during the battle near the Great Quan Empire's border. Back then, 3 cavalry circling city talismans had been linked into a weapon formation powerful enough to imprison the great demon of Burial River. Yet seeing Chen Ping'an personally draw talismans with such skill was another matter entirely.
I knew the young master could use talismans. I witnessed it myself at the Great Quan border. But knowing how to activate talismans and being able to draw them this well are 2 very different things. This is rather unexpected.
What can't my master Daoist surprising about that?
Then why were your eyes so wide just now, and why were you grinning from ear to ear?
Pei Qian immediately put on a solemn expression, refusing to waste words arguing with the old cook. Instead, she glanced toward the roof above. A reckless idea took shape. She inhaled sharply, sprang upward, caught the edge of the eaves with both hands, and tried to swing herself onto the roof. The plan failed spectacularly. Tiles slipped beneath her grip. In the next instant, girl and roof tiles alike slid over the edge and dropped toward the courtyard. Julian could easily have caught her by the collar. His hand even started to move. Then he stopped. He allowed her to fall. For a heartbeat, Pei Qian's mind went completely blank, yet her body responded before fear could overwhelm her. Fiery chi surged through her limbs. Instinctively, she curled inward, her posture faintly echoing the ape-like fist stance Julian had demonstrated before. When she was only a few meters above the ground, her limbs snapped outward, balance returned, and she landed with the nimble reflexes of a small wildcat. Julian had not simply abandoned her to chance. The fall forced Pei Qian's body to reveal what training had already planted inside her. Under sudden danger, chi, stance, and instinct connected on their own. For a martial artist, that kind of unconscious response can be more valuable than repeating a form 1,000 times in safety. Julian leaned against the railing, watching with obvious amusement.
Well, our heroic young lady can already cross roofs and walls. Truly impressive, King Gong.
Pei Qian dropped onto the ground afterward, the delayed terror finally catching up with her. Her face had gone pale. The moment her thoughts returned, she glared up at Julian and erupted.
Why didn't you save me? Old cook, what if I'd fallen badly and couldn't travel anymore? I'm already slow enough to delay master exclamation. What if he became unhappy with me and left me behind?
The thought struck somewhere far deeper than the fall itself. Pei Qian's anger collapsed into fear, and she burst into loud tears. What frightened her most was not pain. It was the possibility of becoming a burden to Chen Ping'an and losing the place beside him that she treasured. Her childish panic exposed an insecurity she rarely admitted aloud. Her crying became loud enough to draw Xianxia from inside. The maidservant hurried into the courtyard, visibly puzzled by the sight before her. Then Julian suddenly widened his eyes and adopted an alarmed expression.
Quick exclamation, upstairs exclamation, there's a demon.
Pei Qian stopped crying instantly. She sprang upright, raced into the building, charged straight into Liu Qingqing's unlocked room, shut the door behind her, seized her hiking pole, and rushed back to Julian almost without taking another breath. While wiping tears from her cheeks, she slapped a yellow talisman onto her forehead and swept the surroundings with enormous seriousness.
Where is it? Where's the demon?
Julian forced down his laughter.
You were lucky. It already fled. Perhaps it realized this building was too troublesome to attack.
Still shaken, Pei Qian completely missed the amusement on his face. Her eyes remained wide as she searched every corner for danger.
Julian, if the demon comes again, you have to protect young Mistress Liu and Big Sister Yar. If Master returns and finds them missing, he'll definitely be angry with me, even if he doesn't say anything.
Xianxia turned aside and covered her mouth, quietly laughing.
You're not worried about yourself.
Pei Qian immediately produced another talisman, pressed it onto her forehead, and tightened both hands around her hiking pole.
Master told me to protect myself, so of course I'll listen to him and protect myself properly.
Julian drew one fist behind his back and rested the other hand before his abdomen, adopting the relaxed bearing of an old martial grandmaster.
Then rest easy. Your master also told me to protect you.
Beneath Julian's teasing was something much steadier. He was testing Pei Qian, teaching her and guarding her at the same time. For all his jokes, Chen Ping'an's command was one he clearly intended to honor. Inside the scripture library, another pair of eyes watched the spiritual changes spreading across the lion garden. Young Master Dugu wore a faint smile.
It seems that sneaky demon is about to be locked inside and beaten.
Can that formation truly seal the entire lion garden and trap it?
Not necessarily. If the demon charges hard enough, the formation may not withstand many direct impacts. But the moment it reveals its true body, that Daoist nun will draw her saber. At that point, the real danger isn't the formation. It's her.
And if it refuses to show itself?
Young Master Dugu pointed toward the perimeter. Ordinary people inside the estate might notice nothing. But cultivators could clearly see slender streams of golden radiance flowing around the lion garden. Spiritual energy was being gathered, condensed, and transformed.
Whatever this talisman formation is called, it's turning spiritual energy almost into liquid. Its cleverness isn't merely entrapping the demon. If my judgment is correct, the formation is also influencing the local mountain roots and water veins. Now that the mountain lord has escaped her restraints, finding the demon's hiding place becomes much easier. And since that young immortal can establish a formation this large, he can keep adding talismans throughout the lion garden, fill every important feng shui node, choke every favorable hiding place, and the demon will find fewer and fewer places where it can breathe comfortably. Even if the talismans don't destroy it outright, they'll force it to suffer like something trapped in water that grows hotter little by little.
This was the real strength of Chen Ping'an's method. He was not relying on one overwhelming strike, he was changing the battlefield itself. By controlling terrain, spiritual flow, and safe routes, he was steadily turning the demon's greatest advantage, concealment, into a narrowing cage. Menglong, however, remained unimpressed.
Using so many talismans for such limited gains is hardly extraordinary. Your teacher could wave a hand and summon purple smoke, and Kai to cover a city of hundreds of thousands. He could seize a dark cloud, turn it into a flying serpent, and use it to suppress a golden core, great demon.
Young Master Dugu sighed with helpless amusement.
I'm praising that young man's strengths. You're praising my master. Those two things don't contradict each other. You really shouldn't belittle every Kai raffiner and pure martial artist simply because they aren't me.
I simply dislike seeing anyone compete with you. Young master, if that person surnamed Chen were a woman, I wouldn't care. Even if she were a sword immortal, my feelings would remain the same.
And if she were a young sword immortal who is also more beautiful than you?
Then I would be so jealous I'd want to kill someone.
Young Master Dugu smiled faintly before giving her a warning about excessive desire and narrow-mindedness.
Sword cultivators already walk the narrowest and steepest roads in the world. As long as the road is wide enough for my flying sword to pass, that's enough.
You say that because you haven't climbed high enough or traveled far enough. Still, there's no need to rush. Your aptitude is good enough for you to walk the sword path slowly. Even my parents have high expectations for you. They consider you an exceptional innate sword talent. Otherwise, they would never have given you that night-wandering deity.
Menglong sensed that her young master had stopped himself from saying something more. She turned and rested her cheek against the corridor railing, quietly waiting. After a brief silence, young Master Dugu chuckled and decided to tell her an old story.
Back then, both my parents accompanied that person to Wind Lightning Field to visit Lai Tuanjing. They witnessed the third duel between the two nascent tier sword cultivators. Our side lost, naturally. Yet afterward, while Lai Tuanjing brewed tea for his guests, he said something very strange.
Li Tuanjing had been the strongest nascent tier cultivator of the eastern treasured vile continent. Yet rather than boasting about cultivation, he questioned why Qi refiners believed themselves qualified to look down upon ordinary mortals, simply because fate had allowed them to enter the path of spiritual cultivation.
He asked, What if the rules established at the beginning had nothing to do with refining spiritual energy? What if closeness to the Tao were measured by who could grow crops best? Or men choose bestiff that were the law of heaven? Would those proud immortals still live so comfortably above everyone else?
The question cuts deeper than cultivation rank. Li Tuanjing was challenging the arrogance born from privilege disguised as destiny. Strength might decide who stands higher, but it does not automatically prove that the strong possess greater worth. In a world obsessed with realms and immortal opportunities, that idea is almost more dangerous than a sword technique.
Li Tuanjing certainly enjoyed saying strange things and doing strange things.
He truly attained the Tao. But after his death, Wind Lightning Field could no longer suppress the rising sword Kai of Sun-Scorched Mountain. That remains true even with Huang He and Liu Baqiao still there.
Meng Long suddenly remembered another matter.
What happened between Liu Baqiao and Su Jiadid? They eventually become a happy couple like the ones in those novels.
Young Master Dugu considered the question for a moment.
Even if their story really does end happily, I suspect we've only reached the middle of that novel.
That answer carries a quiet warning. While a story is still being lived, nobody can safely call the ending. In the martial world, today's reunion can become tomorrow's separation, and today's rising genius can vanish before the next chapter turns. Meng Long lowered her voice, now speaking of the mysterious white paper blessed land and the school of fiction.
Young Master, are fictionists really gathered in the white paper? Blessed Lando, the countless beings they're truly live, according to stories written by those cultivators your mother, said the sages of the school of fiction, possess terrifying abilities. The powerful ones can turn a story concerning an entire nation's fortune into reality. Those with lower cultivation might influence a state or smaller region. A beginner may only be able to determine the fate of one person through a story. And as more characters are written into existence, the white paper blessed land itself continues to expand.
Young Master Dugu only smiled.
The myriad worlds contain no shortage of unbelievable matters, some true and some false. Who can say with certainty which this is?
Then, when the two of us become Earth immortals, should we go there ourselves and discover whether it's true?
Young Master Dugu placed both hands behind his head, his smile widening.
Sure.
Meanwhile, inside Liu Qingshan's study, the atmosphere was nothing like that leisurely conversation. The Slug demon, disguised as a young man in black, paced back and forth with panic written across his face. Chen Ping'an had already been troublesome enough with a sword on his back. Now the demon had discovered that he was also proficient in talismans, and worse, he had brought an astonishing supply of high-grade ones. The Slug demon could not understand it. Why would an outsider spend so much wealth and effort fighting over the Lion Garden? The treasure resting in the study was useful mainly to the old monster aiding the Imperial clan. Yet Chen Ping'an was burning through talismans as though cost meant nothing. From the demon's perspective, Chen Ping'an's behavior was almost irrational. Cultivators normally calculate gains, losses, treasures and risks with ruthless precision. Yet Chen Ping'an was spending resources without any obvious personal reward. That made him difficult to predict, and an unpredictable opponent is often more frightening than a stronger one. The demon's frustration grew. A Daoist saber nun was already threatening enough. Now another righteous cultivator had appeared, helping without demanding profit. Even worse, the two had accidentally formed an effective partnership. Chen Ping'an moved along the outer perimeter, establishing talismans, while Liu Boqi remained inside, forcing the demon to divide its attention. The Slug demon began to wonder whether its carefully chosen scheme against the Lion Garden was about to collapse. Thoughts of the aquiline-nosed old monster and the powerful elder from the Imperial Tang clan only increased its unease. For one dangerous instant, it nearly surrendered to impulse. If it assumed its true form, it believed it could smash directly through the Lion Garden's walls and escape. Once outside, The surrounding mountains would become its refuge. Traveling underground was one of its innate strengths. Unless a nascent tier Earth immortal personally arrived and tore open the mountains to hunt it, the demon had confidence in escaping almost anyone else. But panic did not completely consume it. The demon forced itself to reconsider. The Lion Garden was already a temporary cage. Recklessly revealing its true body might turn a bad situation into a fatal one. This restraint showed that the Slug demon was not merely a frightened beast. It understood the tactical problem clearly. Chen Ping'an wanted it exposed, while Liu Boqi was waiting for precisely that moment. Breaking the cage by brute force might simply mean presenting its true body to the saber waiting inside. Then its expression shifted, a wide smile appeared as another plan formed.
Fine. Then let Master King test your true strength and see whether all of you are merely bluffing.
Outside, atop the outermost wall of the Lion Garden, Chen Ping'an was considering yet another practical problem. He wondered whether Shiru should ask the Liu clan for official silver ingots of the Azure Phoenix Nation. Silver could be processed into ink for drawing talismans. Its effectiveness would be far below that of gold ink, but it carried one important advantage. Chen Ping'an could draw with it much more easily, consuming far less mental strength and energy. The truth was that this entire undertaking had already cost him heavily. The yellow talisman papers he had painstakingly accumulated over a long period were nearly exhausted. Even the spiritual energy gathered but not yet refined by his Dao robe, golden sweet wine, had been consumed in large quantities. Chen Ping'an told none of this to the others. That silence says much about him. The grand formation looked magnificent from the outside, but every line of talisman ink was being paid for with real resources and real exhaustion. Chen Ping'an was not displaying effortless wealth. He was quietly accepting the loss because he had already decided the matter was worth doing. Instead, he tried to think positively. If he truly managed to cover the entire Lion Garden in talismans, then someday he could tell Zhang Shanfeng and Xu Yuanxia about it. With wine on the table, it would make quite a story. There is something fitting about that thought. Other cultivators might remember such an achievement as proof of power. Chen Ping'an imagined it first as a tale to share with old friends over wine. Even amid danger, his measure of value remained strangely human. Then his expression changed. Across the vast Lion Garden, nearly 100 young men dressed in black appeared almost simultaneously. Some sprinted along corridors, some flew across rooftops, others raced over creeks and streams with astonishing speed. Every one of them was fleeing toward the outside. One of those black-robed figures could very well be the demon's true body. The demon had finally made its move. Instead of smashing the cage directly, it flooded the battlefield with false targets. Chen Ping'an now faced the opposite problem from before, not finding a hidden enemy, but identifying one genuine body among almost 100 fleeing illusions. Chen Ping'an understood the stakes immediately. If the demon escaped the Lion Garden now, there would be little he could do to stop it from secretly returning another day. He also knew the limitations of his own talismans. Calling them lively and spiritually vigorous would be fair, but their endurance was poor. Their spiritual energy depleted far too quickly. That was one of the most serious weaknesses when a pure martial artist attempted to walk the path of talisman drawing. So the battle had entered its decisive phase. Chen Ping'an's formation could not maintain perfect pressure forever. The demon knew this. Chen Ping'an knew it as well. From this moment onward, every breath mattered. Chen Ping'an made his decision without hesitation and turned toward Shiru.
I'll remain here. You guard the wall on the right. Fox demon illusions aren't difficult to destroy. If you find the true body, you only need to delay it for a short while. As for the demon binding chain I lent you.
Shiru misunderstood him completely. Assuming he wanted the immortal treasure returned, She calmly took out the golden rope and handed it toward him. Chen Ping'an stared at her, half amused and half irritated.
It's for you to use properly. Now hurry and guard that side.
Shiru paused in surprise. Then, still holding the extremely high-grade demon-binding chain, she leaped away toward the appointed section of the wall. Chen Ping'an remained where he was. His hand gently touched the sword-nurturing gourd at his waist. He did not release the 2 flying swords inside. There was no reason to hurry. They were his hidden blades, his final cards. Only after the demon's true escape route had been confirmed would it be time for them to leave the gourd. This was Chen Ping'an's answer to the demon's deception. Patience. The enemy had created nearly 100 bodies to force him into acting blindly, but he refused to spend his strongest weapons on uncertainty. In a contest of traps within traps, the person who reveals the final card first may also be the first to lose. And now the Lion Garden had become a true battlefield of mines. Golden talisman light sealed the perimeter. Liu Boqi waited inside with her saber. Shiru guarded one flank with the demon-binding chain. Chen Ping'an held his flying swords in reserve. Somewhere among nearly 100 fleeing shadows, the Slug demon was making its gamble. The next mistake would decide who escaped the cage, and who would be buried inside it. At the scripture library, the battle outside had already stirred maidservant Meng Long's blood. Her eyes burned with eagerness as she watched the demon's scattered manifestations swarm through the Lion Garden. To someone like her, remaining idle while enemies ran rampant was far more unbearable than danger itself.
Young master, let me deal with the demon. Decoy technique or true body, it makes no difference. If I keep standing here doing nothing, I'm going to die of boredom before the demon ever reaches us.
Young Master Dagu did not immediately refuse her request, yet his concern was not merely the demon. Countless eyes across the Azure Phoenix nation were presently fixed on the Lion Garden, and sometimes the gaze of jealous cultivators was more troublesome than an enemy standing openly before you.
You may fight, but you are forbidden from using your bonded flying sword. Too many people are watching this place. Give those with malicious intentions even the smallest excuse, and they will turn it into another crime to place on our heads. I have no desire to invite more trouble. And one more thing, do not wreck half the Lion Garden while you're enjoying yourself.
Meng Long was visibly disappointed by the restriction, but permission to move was still far better than being reduced to a decorative wooden puppet. She tapped the ground lightly, rose onto the railing, and steadied herself. Her fingers formed seal after seal, while a mantra flowed from her lips. Golden sparks gradually appeared within her bright eyes. She extended one hand toward the garden, spiritual energy gathering around her fingertips.
Come forth.
A thunderous impact answered her command. A golden-armored deity 9 meters tall descended onto the earth, and the ground groaned beneath its weight as dust erupted around its feet. 5 multicolored ribbons, condensed entirely from spiritual energy, wound around its enormous body. A crown rested upon its head. Miasma radiated from the armor covering one arm, while the armor on the other bore savage images of ghosts and fiends. Yet despite such an imposing appearance, the deity's eyes remained firmly shut. Then Meng Long's will reached it. The night-wandering deity strode forward with closed eyes, yet every pavilion, corridor, and wall seemed perfectly clear within its perception. It deliberately avoided the buildings, each step sending a tremor through the garden. One black-robed young man failed to evade in time. The deity's foot descended, and the illusory body burst apart beneath the overwhelming force. The 5 ribbons shot outward like flood dragons breaking from their lair. Though each was only several meters long, they moved with terrifying precision, piercing one illusion after another before the targets could scatter. Another false body leaped across the rooftops. The deity merely swung an arm. Golden force swept through the air, and the fleeing manifestation shattered instantly. Meng Long shifted into a relaxed sitting position atop the railing, clearly unimpressed by the resistance.
That's all demons' illusory bodies are this weak.
It has already split off a wisp of its soul. Under those circumstances, maintaining this many manifestations while keeping them so quick and agile is hardly unimpressive.
Young Master Dugu's judgment exposed the real danger. The individual illusions were fragile, but their strength lay in numbers, mobility, and the demon's willingness to scatter its soul. This was not a contest of one powerful body against another. It was a battle of control, attrition, and finding the hidden true form before the defensive formation was exhausted. Elsewhere in the Lion Garden, the cultivators observing the battle finally moved. The master and disciple positioned at an elevated location, along with the pair of Dao partners, had all seen Menglong's night-wandering deity crush the demon's manifestations with little danger. Whether by caution or pride, both groups entered the battle a heartbeat later than she did. The small fiery red fox resting on the old man's shoulder sprang into the air. Its body expanded several times before landing upon a roof ridge as a blazing fox as large as an ox, tongues of flame flickering across its fur. At almost the same time, the tall and sturdy young man swept his arm forward. The verdant snake coiled around it, leaped away and transformed in mid-air, becoming a giant serpent 6 meters long. Fox and serpent immediately pursued the black-robed young men fleeing through the Lion Garden. The Dao partners attacked in perfect coordination. One remained near the garden and sent the sword carried on their back streaking into the battlefield, controlling it from afar like a sword cultivator cutting enemies down beyond arm's reach. The other formed hand seals while advancing. A concentrated breath of spiritual energy was exhaled across the garden, spreading like mist over trees and flowers. Within that haze, spirit projections of different shapes, colors, and sizes abruptly materialized. Those summoned spirits chased the demon's illusions without hesitation. Whenever one caught its target, it detonated with a deafening blast. Chen Ping'an and Shi Ru each defended one side of the scripture library. With the master and disciple and the Dao partners joining the fight, 4 cultivators now formed the main defense along the western side of the Lion Garden. Standing atop the wall, Chen Ping'an answered the swarm with his fists. Shi Ru, meanwhile, wielded the demon-binding chain fashioned from a golden flood dragon whisker, lashing it through the air to force the advancing illusions back. But the enemy numbers were enormous. Nearly 40 black-robed manifestations still lingered around the garden's outer perimeter, repeatedly throwing themselves against the wall, where a golden talisman flood dragon swam across the surface like a living river of light. Young Master Dugu remained outside the scripture library with his hands behind his back. He neither allowed Menglong to draw her bonded flying sword, nor made any move himself. He simply watched. That restraint inevitably created openings, and several manifestations slipped through the defenders. Yet the night-wandering deity was so overwhelming that many black-robed figures attempting to escape toward the wall near the scripture library took one glance at it and immediately fled in another direction. Thus, only a handful continued toward that section of the outer wall. Ironically, the western side had more cultivators defending it, yet it also drew the largest tide of demon manifestations. The pressure there rose with every passing breath. Shi Ru began to lose some of her composure. She was a yin entity, but combat and slaughter had never been her greatest strengths. More importantly, the trump card Kui Dongshan had left her was something she did not dare reveal casually. Nearly 10 black-robed figures broke past her chain and struck the outer wall. Golden light surged through them and erased their bodies. A few endured the first impact, only to continue charging forward without hesitation, willingly rushing into the talisman light again. Despite her momentary fluster, Shiro was still strong enough to dispose of those that reached her. Chen Ping'an, by contrast, appeared almost leisurely. His punches seemed slow, yet every strike arrived exactly where it was needed. Moving back and forth along the wall with his 6-step walking meditation, he let his sleeves billow in the wind while powerful fist aura rolled outward in waves. That calmness was the difference between Chen Ping'an and the others. He was not trying to overwhelm the battlefield with spectacle. Every step conserved position, every punch guarded an opening, and every breath of true chi served the larger formation. Yet even perfect efficiency could not erase the cost of maintaining so many talismans. The golden flood dragon flowing over the snow-white wall had already become much dimmer. Each collision from the demon's manifestations weakened the talisman network and opened countless tiny gaps in its defense. Chen Ping'an had drawn talismans across the Lion Garden on an enormous scale. Now the expenditure was catching up with him. His current breath of true chi could no longer continuously support the defense while dealing with so many enemies. He would soon have to stop and replenish it. And precisely at that moment, something deep beneath the Lion Garden moved. Near the Liu clan ancestral hall, the earth suddenly convulsed, as though the mythical Ao itself had rolled over underground. A tremendous rumbling spread outward like an earthquake, with the western region suffering the strongest tremors. Meng Long instantly rose from the railing. Her expression changed, and both hands began forming seals. She closed her eyes and activated a secret technique. Her soul left her body and entered the towering night-wandering deity. For the first time, the golden deity opened its eyes. It bent its knees and exploded upward. The ground where it had stood collapsed into a crater as its 9-meter body tore through the air toward the western side of the Lion Garden. The deity crashed down inside the walled western garden. Its feet sank deeply into the soil. Squatting low, it swung both arms downward and hammered the earth with savage force, blasting dirt and stone in every direction. Something beneath the garden snapped. The night-wandering deity had forcibly severed a small mountain root hidden underground. Young Master Dugu hesitated for only an instant. In the end, he still chose not to interfere. Then the true monster finally emerged. Near the scripture library, the earth split apart, and an enormous, handsome young man rose from beneath the soil, his body towering 15 to 18 meters high. This was the Slug demon's golden Dao manifestation, nearly as tall as the scripture library itself. The moment it surfaced, it charged straight toward the nearby outer wall. The golden flood dragon covering the wall immediately wrapped around its path like a rope designed to trip a giant. But the demon roared and continued forward, dragging the talisman power from other portions of the wall toward itself. A section of the outer wall collapsed under the impact. Even then, a slender thread of golden talismanic power remained stubbornly bound around the demon's knee. The giant raised its leg high, trying to tear free, but the golden restraint refused to release it, so the demon simply stopped caring and surged onward. The talisman flood dragon finally tore in two. One half remained on the wall, while the other was dragged across the earth behind the golden Dao manifestation. It resembled a massive fish that could not remove the hook from its mouth, yet possessed enough strength to wrench the entire fishing rod away from the fisherman and keep swimming. But this was precisely where the situation became suspicious. The demon had revealed something enormous, obvious, and powerful at the exact moment the defenses were weakening. For an experienced fighter, such a convenient target was almost too convenient. Chen Ping'an lowered one hand to the opening of his sword-nurturing gourd. His attention did not remain fixed on the towering manifestation.
Something isn't right. Wait a little longer.
Before he acted, another figure moved first. A slender silhouette that had remained atop a pavilion roof suddenly shot into the heavens. A brilliant white trail split the sky behind her, and the pavilion beneath her feet collapsed with a tremendous rumble. Daoist Nunliu Boqi finally drew her saber. She rose higher than the scripture library itself and delivered a single terrifying downward slash. The golden Dao manifestation of the Slug demon was cleaved cleanly into two. Liu Boqi did not even spare the collapsing golden body another glance. A cold laugh escaped her lips.
Go.
A saber-wielding man emerged from behind her. He stood only as tall as an ordinary person. yet his form resembled flowing mercury mixed with crackling lightning. In his grasp was a thin black saber longer than his entire body. Then he vanished. A flash crossed the battlefield. In the next instant, the tip of his long saber had pierced directly into a tiny hole in the wall. The saber-wielding figure stopped moving completely. Shiro swallowed and looked downward. Behind the blade's tip squirmed a snow-white demon no larger than a palm. The enormous golden Dao manifestation had been bait. The true body was tiny enough to hide inside a gap in the wall. Liu Boqi had not merely overpowered the demon, she had seen through its escape method and struck the real target in the instant everyone else's attention was drawn toward the giant form. Liu Boqi descended beside the wall near Shiru. She approached the saber-wielding deity, and the two forms merged once more. In a blink, only Liu Boqi remained. The extraordinarily long saber, however, still hovered in mid-air, pinning the treasure creation demon in place. Liu Boqi walked toward its tip, looking entirely satisfied.
Caught you.
Yet she did not immediately store the treasure creation demon away. Instead, she raised her head toward the distant wall and fixed her gaze on the young man in white, whose hand had already moved away from the sword-nurturing gourd.
Well, there are several of you and only one of me. Do you intend to fight me for this demon?
Chen Ping'an smiled.
You took advantage of everyone else's efforts. There's no need to pretend you didn't.
Liu Boqi answered with extraordinary generosity, at least according to her own definition of generosity.
You did contribute to my capture of it. I won't deny that. Unfortunately, I have never developed the habit of dividing my spoils with other people. If that bothers you, then fight me for ownership. I can even promise not to kill anyone. Once you've experienced my strength and yielded willingly, you may even feel grateful afterward. You may lose the demon, but at least you'll still be alive. That is hardly the worst ending.
Her words were arrogance backed by genuine strength. Liu Boqi had just split the golden Dao manifestation with one saber strike and captured the true body immediately afterward. This was not empty intimidation. If negotiations collapsed, everyone present understood exactly what kind of opponent Chen Ping'an would be facing. Chen Ping'an began walking along the wall toward the Daoist saber nun. At the same time, Julian leaped from Liu Qingqing's residence and landed upon a curved eave near Liu Boqi. The atmosphere instantly recalled their first confrontation in Julian's small courtyard. Shiro advanced several steps through the air and moved aside, clearing the wall for Chen Ping'an. Only after he passed did she fall in behind him. Chen Ping'an waved one hand toward Julian, signaling him not to interfere. Liu Boqi also stepped onto the tall wall and walked toward him. She left her bonded saber, jianghu, behind. In her hand she carried only the unsheathed Jing god. A strange gleam entered Liu Boqi's eyes.
You intend to challenge me alone?
Chen Ping'an kept walking. One hand reached behind him and closed around the hilt of sword immortal. On one side stood a Daoist nun of the Daoist saber room. On the other stood a pure martial artist carrying a pseudo-celestial tool upon his back. Only 50 paces separated them. This was the kind of distance where words could become killing techniques in a single breath. Chen Ping'an had already shown that he was willing to conserve strength when necessary, but placing his hand on sword immortal meant he was equally willing to escalate if the situation demanded it. Then, without warning, Liu Boqi turned her head toward the summit of a green mountain. Chen Ping'an turned almost simultaneously. He caught only the final glimpse of an elderly figure disappearing from the mountain peak. That fleeting presence changed the entire negotiation. Neither Chen Ping'an nor Liu Boqi needed an explanation. For experts at their level, a single hidden observer could overturn every calculation on the battlefield. Liu Boqi withdrew her gaze. From the corner of her eye, she could also see members of the Liu clan hurrying toward them. Among the approaching group was a miserable-looking scholar with a crippled leg. The Daoist nun suddenly sheathed her saber.
We split the treasure creation demon. 70% to me, 30% to you.
For once, genuine confusion appeared on Chen Ping'an's face. Liu Boqi immediately grew irritated.
What, that still isn't enough for you?
Chen Ping'an remembered the direction she had looked moments earlier. Understanding suddenly flashed through his mind. He removed his hand from Sword Immortal and clasped it calmly behind his back. His other hand rubbed the sword-nurturing gourd as a faint smile appeared.
50-50. I'll agree to that.
Liu Boqi narrowed her eyes.
Don't push your luck. Knowing when to stop while you're ahead is a useful habit.
Shiro released a long breath. Yet disappointment appeared on her face, as though she were genuinely trying to persuade her master not to provoke such a dangerous opponent.
Master, perhaps we should leave matters here. You are not merely someone who lives apart from the mortal world. Gaining a good reputation has value as well. Why not allow this senior immortal to take the larger share? Once this matter is settled, Master still intends to remain in the Azure Phoenix Nation to observe the debate between Buddhism and Taoism, and there are acquaintances you must visit as well. Scholars who value face also place great importance on reputation.
Hidden behind his back, Chen Ping'an silently raised a thumb toward Shiro. Shiro had understood his intention immediately. Her seemingly timid persuasion gave Chen Ping'an a respectable reason to bargain, while also painting Liu Boqi as the senior expert, taking advantage of others. In a negotiation among cultivators, face could be wielded almost as effectively as a sword. Liu Boqi glanced at Shiro and gave a dismissive scoff.
You're a female ghost, yet you're hiding inside the body of some disheveled old man. Doesn't that bother you?
Shiro merely smiled and offered no reply. The Liu clan group was drawing closer. Whatever hidden considerations Liu Boqi had, she clearly did not intend to continue arguing in front of them. She raised one hand and made a grabbing motion. Her bonded saber jianghu immediately flew into her palm. Then she took an extremely small gourd from her sleeve and stored the snow-white slug demon inside. Her voice dropped, carrying unmistakable irritation.
We'll settle how to divide the spoils afterward.
Chen Ping'an nodded with an easy smile.
All right.
And just like that, a confrontation that had been one handspan away from becoming a saber and sword battle ended at the negotiating table instead. Yet the elderly figure on the distant mountain peak had already revealed something more important than the division of one treasure creation demon. Powerful eyes were still watching the Lion Garden, and the struggle surrounding this place was far from over.